Jack Calloway ran through the dense forest, his breath coming in quick bursts, but not from exhaustion, he was laughing. The trio behind him, Griff, Lou, and Sam, were not. They were cursing, tripping over roots, and crashing through branches in their desperate attempt to catch him. They had been on his tail for days, and now they finally had him in sight. "This time, we got him!" Lou huffed, stumbling over an exposed rock. "Shut up and run!" Griff barked, leading the chase. He was the biggest of the three, a brute of a man whose patience had been ground down to nothing. Jack Calloway had escaped them too many times before, slipping out of cuffs, disappearing from locked rooms, and once even tricking them into arresting the wrong man. But not this time. This time, they had the advantage. Jack darted through a break in the trees, and the bounty hunters followed, emerging into a clearing bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. There he stood, hands on his knees, panting, finally cornered. Behind him lay nothing but a steep drop into darkness. "Well, well, Calloway," Griff sneered, slowing to a confident stroll. "You look a little winded." Jack straightened up, grinning despite the sweat dripping from his brow. "I gotta say, fellas, you sure do know how to keep a man entertained. Fastest I've ever seen you move, Griff." Griff scowled but didn't take the bait. He knew Jack's game. "No more running, Jack. You got nowhere left to go." Lou and Sam flanked him, blocking any possible escape. Jack sighed dramatically and raised his hands. "You got me," he said, voice light. "Guess all that running was for nothing." Griff's eyes narrowed. This was too easy. But Sam, the jumpy one, already had the cuffs out, stepping forward eagerly. "Finally, you son of a—" Then Jack let out a sound that sent a chill down their spines, a deep, guttural war cry that seemed to shake the trees. It was so sudden, so wild, that all three bounty hunters hesitated, instinct screaming that something was wrong. And then the ground beneath them disappeared. The pit had been hidden well, covered with leaves and thin branches. Too focused on their prize, they had walked right into Jack's trap. They hit the muddy bottom hard, a tangle of limbs and groans. Griff landed first, the weight of Lou and Sam piling on top of him. Jack peered over the edge, his grin wide. "Well, would you look at that?" he mused, brushing dirt off his sleeve. "Guess I had one more trick up my sleeve," Griff roared, struggling to sit up. "You cheating little—" Jack held up a finger. Now, let's not ruin the moment. This is what they call poetic justice." Sam wiped mud from his face, glancing up. The pit was deep, at least 10 feet. Too steep to climb, and with the slick mud at the bottom, they had no leverage. "How the hell did you even have time to do this?" he grumbled. Jack shrugged. "You boys are predictable." Lou groaned, rubbing his back. "You planned this?" "I plan everything," Jack said, resting his chin on his fist. "Now, what should I do with you? Leave you here? Maybe let the wolves have a turn?" Griff pounded a fist into the ground. "You're not gonna kill us, Calloway." "Course not," Jack said, pretending to look offended. "I'm not the killer type. Just the type that enjoys watching idiots dig their own graves." He leaned back, sighing happily. "Ah, this is fun." Griff took a deep breath, forcing his anger down. All right. Look. Let's be reasonable." Jack raised a brow. "Oh, I do love a good negotiation." Lou jumped in, his voice desperate. "We'll split the bounty with you. You help us out, we tell the authorities you were never here. 50-50. Jack pretended to consider it, tilting his head. Tempting. But then again, I don't think I like sharing. 70-30, Lou said quickly. "You get the bigger cut." Jack grinned. "I appreciate the effort, boys, but I think you're missing the point. It's not about the money. It's about proving a point." Griff's patience finally snapped. "And what damn point is that?" Jack stood, dusting off his pants. "That arrogance gets you nowhere." Lou and Sam exchanged uneasy glances. Griff, still seething, stayed silent. Jack gave them a mock salute. "Now you boys think about that while I enjoy a well-earned drink. And if you're lucky, Someone might find you before you start eating each other. He turned and walked away, whistling a tune, his war cry still ringing in their ears. The pit was darkening as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across its muddy walls. Griff, Lou, and Sam sat in a miserable heap at the bottom, their clothes soaked in grime, their patience running dangerously thin. Every attempt to claw their way out had ended with them sliding back down, caked in even more filth. The air was thick with frustration. Lou wiped a sleeve across his face, only making himself dirtier. "I swear, if I ever see that smug bastard again." Griff grunted, rubbing his temples. "You'll what, Lou? Run into another one of his damned traps?" Sam, normally the quiet one, let out a tired sigh. "We should have known. Jack Calloway always has a plan." "That's exactly the problem," Griff muttered. He glanced up at the rim of the pit. It wasn't impossibly high, but without solid footing, it may as well have been a canyon. "We're not getting out of here without help," Lou huffed, crossing his arms. "And who the hell is gonna help us? The guy who put us in here?" Griff didn't answer. The truth was, Jack had won. And worst of all, he hadn't even needed to kill them to do it. Footsteps approached the edge, sending dirt tumbling down. Jack's silhouette appeared against the fading sky, his arms folded lazily. Well, still down there?" His voice was light, almost bored. "I was sure you'd have figured something out by now." Griff's jaw clenched. "We ain't in the mood for games, Calloway." Jack let out a mock gasp. "No games? Then what's the fun in this?" Lou stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. "All right, listen, Jack. We made a mistake underestimating you. We get that now. So how about you do the decent thing and help us out?" Jack sat on the edge, swinging his legs. "See, that's interesting. Because just a little while ago, you were so sure you had me. Thought you were real clever. And now? Now you want me to be the bigger man?" He let out a long, exaggerated sigh. "Life sure is funny, ain't it?" Sam, sensing this wasn't going anywhere, decided on a different approach. "All right, Jack. What do you want?" Jack perked up. "Ooh, now that's the right question." Griff wasn't about to beg, but he also knew they weren't in a position to negotiate. "Just spit it out." Jack stroked his chin, pretending to think. "Well, let's see. I could just leave you down there and let nature take its course. Or I could make you work for your freedom." Lou groaned. "I don't like the sound of that." Jack pointed a finger at him. "That's the spirit. Suspicion keeps you sharp." He leaned forward. "Here's the deal. You admit that you lost fair and square. That I outsmarted you. And most importantly, that you'll think twice before assuming I'm just another outlaw for the taking." Griff laughed dryly. "That's it? You just want us to say you won?" Jack grinned. "Words have power, my friend." The three bounty hunters exchanged glances. Lou looked skeptical, Sam looked thoughtful, and Griff looked like he'd rather eat his own boot than admit defeat. Lou, ever the realist, sighed. "Fine. You won." Jack cupped a hand to his ear. "What was that?" Lou rolled his eyes. "You won, all right?" Jack nodded approvingly. "See? That wasn't so hard." He turned to Sam, who hesitated before nodding. "Yeah. You got us." Griff, on the other hand, sat in stubborn silence. Jack sighed, tapping his fingers against his knee. Griff. You're making this difficult." Griff glared up at him. "I ain't saying it." Jack leaned back, resting his weight on his hands. "Suit yourself." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an apple, taking a slow, deliberate bite. "Tell you what, boys. I'll leave this rope right here." He tossed a thick coil of rope onto the ground beside him, the end dangling just out of reach. "Figure out a way to get it, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get out of there before something hungry finds you." Griff seethed but said nothing. Lou and Sam looked at each other, then at the rope, then back at Griff. Jack stood, brushing off his coat. "It's been fun, truly. But I've got places to be." He gave them a final, playful salute before disappearing into the trees. Silence settled over the pit. Lou exhaled sharply. Griff. No. Griff. I said no. Sam rubbed his temples. Oh, for the love of Griff, he beat us, all right? We fell into his damn trap, and now he's got us dancing like fools. Just say it so we can get out of here. Griff clenched his fists. Every fiber of his being resisted. He'd spent years hunting down men like Jack Calloway, believing himself superior, always in control. But now he was the fool. And Jack had made sure he knew it. He exhaled sharply through his nose. Fine. He looked up at the rope, voice tight with frustration. Jack Calloway outsmarted me. Nothing happened. Lou rolled his eyes. You gotta say it like you mean it, dumbass. Griff gritted his teeth, but his pride was a useless thing in the face of their situation. He took a deep breath, forcing the words out like they physically pained him. Jack Calloway outsmarted me. The moment the words left his mouth, a gust of wind rattled the trees above, causing the rope to shift slightly. Sam wasted no time, leaping up and snagging it before it could move again. About damn time, Lou muttered. Griff scowled but said nothing as they set to climbing, clawing their way out of the pit. By the time they reached the surface, the sun had nearly set, and Jack Calloway was long gone. Griff dusted himself off, his face dark with something more than just dirt. We're getting him, he muttered. No matter what it takes. Sam sighed, stretching his arms. Yeah, well, maybe we don't fall into any more holes next time. Lou cracked his neck. Or maybe, just maybe, we actually think before we try to catch him. Griff shot them both a look, then turned, heading toward the distant lights of a town. Shut up and start walking. As they disappeared into the trees, a distant, unmistakable sound echoed through the woods, a wild, victorious war cry that sent chills down their spines. Jack Calloway was still out there. And he was still laughing. The night was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine as Griff, Lou, and Sam trudged toward the dim glow of a town in the distance. Their bodies ached from the climb, their pride even more bruised than their limbs. None of them spoke much, each lost in the humiliation of having been bested so thoroughly by Jack Calloway. Sam, always the quiet thinker, was the first to break the silence. So what's the plan now? Griff kept walking, jaw tight. We get him. No matter what. Lou scoffed. Yeah? And how do we do that without falling into another one of his damn traps? Griff didn't have an answer, but that didn't stop him from clenching his fists. He wasn't just hunting Jack Calloway anymore. This had become personal. By the time they reached the town, exhaustion was weighing down their steps. The main street was still lively, lanterns glowing warm against wooden buildings, the saloon bustling with laughter and music. They pushed through the doors, the scent of whiskey and fried food hitting them like a wave. A few patrons glanced their way, noting their bedraggled state, but quickly went back to their drinks. This wasn't a town where people asked too many questions. They took a corner table, each of them slumping into their chairs. A barmaid came over, raising a brow at their mud-covered clothes. Long day? You wouldn't believe it, Lou muttered. Whiskey. 3. As she walked off, Sam glanced around. What if he's here? Griff smirked. Then we end this tonight. But Jack Calloway wasn't in the saloon. At least, not visibly. What they didn't know was that he had been there not an hour ago, enjoying a drink and sharing a laugh with a woman who had far more reason than anyone to hate Griff. Maggie Barnes, the owner of the saloon, leaned against the bar, watching the bounty hunters with a calculating gaze. She had once been married to Griff's brother, a mean-spirited drunk who had met an unfortunate end. Griff had never lifted a finger to stop the man's cruelty, and Maggie had never forgiven him for it. So when Jack Calloway had strolled into her establishment earlier, flashing that easy grin and telling her his story, she had seen an opportunity. She moved with practiced ease, taking their drinks over herself. Setting them down, she gave Griff a slow, knowing smile. Well. Haven't seen you in a while. Griff looked up, frowning. Maggie. Still making a mess of things, I see. Lou and Sam exchanged glances. This wasn't just a casual bartender-customer interaction. There was history here. Griff straightened up. Not here for trouble. Just a drink. Maggie chuckled. Trouble finds you all the same. She leaned in slightly. Funny thing, though. A friend of yours came through earlier. Seemed real pleased with himself. Griff's eyes darkened. Calloway. Maggie smirked. Didn't say his name, but you know how small towns are. Word gets around. She tapped a finger against the table. Said something about celebrating. Something about a bunch of fools covered in mud. Lou groaned. I hate him so much. Maggie straightened. He didn't stick around. But if I were you, I'd check the stables before he rides out. Griff was already on his feet before she finished speaking. Let's go. Lou and Sam followed him out, barely pausing to throw coins on the table. Maggie watched them go, shaking her head with a smile. The stables were quiet, the horses shifting in their stalls, the scent of hay thick in the cool night air. The bounty hunters moved carefully, peering between wooden slats, hands hovering near their weapons. Then, from the shadows, came a familiar voice. Took you boys long enough. Jack sat casually on a bale of hay, whittling a small piece of wood, his hat tilted slightly forward. He didn't even look up. Griff's hand went to his gun. You got nowhere to run this time, Calloway. Jack finally glanced up, amusement dancing in his eyes. Oh, Griff. That's what you said last time. Lou and Sam shifted uncomfortably. They had him. Right here. But why did it feel like they were still walking into something? Griff took a step forward. You think this is funny? Jack twirled the small knife in his hand. Oh, I think it's hilarious. Griff wasn't in the mood for another game. You're coming with us. Jack sighed dramatically. And miss all the fun? Before they could ask what he meant, there was a sudden movement from behind them. The doors to the stables slammed shut, and the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked filled the air. Maggie's voice rang out. I think maybe we ought to even the odds, boys. They turned to find Maggie standing there, shotgun aimed steady at Griff. Lou threw up his hands. Oh, come on. Really? Jack leaned back against the hay, stretching out like a man without a care in the world. Maggie and I had a nice little chat earlier. Turns out she's not a big fan of you, Griff. Griff's jaw tightened. This ain't your fight, Maggie. She smirked. Maybe not. But I do love a good show. Jack stood, dusting off his coat. Now, here's what's gonna happen. You boys are gonna walk out of here real slow, no weapons drawn. And you're gonna start rethinking your life choices. Griff's hands clenched into fists. And if we don't? Jack grinned. Then I get to see just how fast you can dodge a bullet. Sam sighed, already stepping back. Griff, let's not do this. Lou nodded. Yeah, we lost twice in one day. Let's not make it 3. Griff's whole body burned with frustration. But he wasn't stupid. Not when there was a shotgun pointed at him. Slowly, they backed out of the stable, keeping their hands where Maggie could see them. Jack tipped his hat. Pleasure as always, boys. As soon as they were clear, Maggie slammed the doors shut behind them. A lock clicked into place. Griff turned and stalked off without a word, Lou and Sam trailing behind him. From inside, Jack's laughter echoed into the night. The night air was cool, but Griff's blood was boiling. He stormed down the empty street, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lou and Sam trailed behind him, exchanging wary glances. It wasn't often that Griff was this quiet, this seething. Lou finally broke the silence. So, what's the new plan? Griff didn't slow his stride. We catch him. Lou sighed. Right. But, considering we've been outsmarted twice in one day, maybe we should rethink how we do that? Griff stopped suddenly, turning on his heel. You think this is funny, Lou? Lou raised his hands. Not even a little. Sam, ever the mediator, stepped in. Griff, listen. He's not like the others we've caught. He doesn't fight like we do. Doesn't run like we do. Every time we think we've got him, He's already 3 steps ahead. Griff exhaled sharply, his frustration plain. He knew they were right. He just didn't want to admit it. Lou crossed his arms. We need to think like him. If we keep charging in, he's just gonna make us look like idiots again. Griff glared at him, then shook his head. Fine. We change tactics. We find out what he wants, where he's going, and we get ahead of him. Sam nodded. Now that I can work with. The 3 of them turned back toward town, determined not to let Jack Calloway win again. Jack sat in the dim light of Maggie's office, boots propped up on her desk, sipping a glass of whiskey. Across from him, Maggie leaned against the cabinet, arms folded, a knowing smile on her face. You sure do know how to stir up trouble, she said. Jack grinned. It's a talent. Maggie took a sip of her own drink. And what's your plan now? You know they ain't just gonna let this go. Jack swirled the whiskey in his glass. Oh, I'm counting on that. Maggie shook her head. You're playing with fire, Calloway. Jack smirked. That's the best way to stay warm. She let out a low chuckle. Well, whatever game you're playing, you better play it fast. Griff don't like losing. Jack tipped his glass toward her. Neither do I. By morning, Griff, Lou, and Sam were already putting their plan into motion. Sam had spent the night gathering information. As it turned out, Jack Calloway wasn't just wandering aimlessly. He had a destination in mind. A small fort in the hills, long abandoned by the military but still sturdy enough to make a good hideout. More importantly, it was the perfect place for an ambush. Lou leaned over the map spread across their table. All right. He's gonna take this route if he's heading for the fort. Not a lot of options through the pass. We set up here, here, and here. He pointed to 3 key locations. And we cut off his escape routes. Griff nodded. No more games. No more tricks. This time, we take him down. Sam tapped his fingers on the table. You really think it's gonna be that simple? Griff's eyes burned with determination. It has to be. Jack knew they'd come after him. He was counting on it. As he rode toward the old fort, he kept an easy pace, knowing he was being followed. The hills around him were silent, but he could feel the presence of his pursuers, like wolves stalking prey. Except this time, the prey was setting the trap. He reached the fort just as the sun was beginning to set, its stone walls weathered but strong. He dismounted, tied his horse, and stretched. Then he waited. It didn't take long. Griff and his men arrived cautiously, spreading out as they approached. Jack stood in the open, arms crossed, watching them with an amused expression. Griff stepped forward. This ends here, Calloway. Jack tilted his head. Which part? The fun? The laughter? The mild humiliation? Griff's jaw tightened. You're outnumbered. No tricks. No traps. Just you and us. Jack sighed. You really think I'd walk into this without a plan? Lou tensed. Oh, come on. Jack gave a sharp whistle. From the shadows of the fort, figures emerged. Maggie's men, armed and ready. Griff cursed under his breath. Of course. Jack shrugged. Like I said, Griff. No one wins by playing fair. Griff clenched his fists. You really think they'll fight for you? Jack smirked. Oh, they're not here for me. Maggie stepped forward, shotgun resting on her shoulder. They're here for you. Griff's eyes flickered with understanding. This ain't about Calloway. Maggie smirked. Nope. It's about settling old debts. Lou groaned. I really hate this town. Jack grinned. You and me both, Lou. The standoff stretched, tension thick in the air. Jack rolled his shoulders. Well, who's making the first move? No one did. Because for the first time, Griff realized, maybe, just maybe, Jack Calloway wasn't the one being hunted. Maybe he was. You said? The tension in the fort was thick enough to choke on. The last light of the day stretched long across the dusty ground, painting jagged shadows from the walls and figures standing motionless within them. Griff, Lou, and Sam stood with their backs to the entrance, a dozen pairs of eyes locked on them. Jack Calloway stood off to the side, looking as casual as ever, as if this wasn't the moment everything would come to a head. Griff's gaze darted to Maggie. She hadn't moved, her shotgun resting comfortably on her shoulder. He knew she wasn't bluffing. She had no reason to be. That's what made her dangerous. Jack, on the other hand? Jack was dangerous because you never knew when he was bluffing. Griff took a slow step forward. All right, Calloway. You made your point. Jack raised a brow. Oh? Which one? I made quite a few. Griff ignored him. You got the upper hand, sure. But what's next? You gonna keep running? Keep playing games? His voice lowered slightly, just enough to make the words weigh more. Or are you gonna finally admit you don't got a real way out of this? Jack's smirk faltered, just for a second. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But Griff saw it. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had an edge. Jack shrugged. Way I see it, I'm not the one stuck in a corner. Griff shook his head. Maggie ain't gonna fight your battles forever. Maggie scoffed. Who said I was fighting for him? Jack grinned. See, Griff? You keep assuming things. That's how you got into this mess. Lou exhaled sharply. For once in my life, I'd like to catch this man without hearing a damn speech about how he's smarter than us. Sam nodded. Same. Jack spread his arms. Fellas, I don't think I'm smarter than you. I just am. Griff took another step. You don't got an escape plan this time, Jack? Jack tilted his head. You sure about that? And just like that, the first punch was thrown. Lou had twitched, just a little, but it was enough. One of Maggie's men saw it, misread it, and swung first. Then everything erupted into chaos. Fists flew, bodies crashed into wooden crates, and the sound of breaking glass and grunts of pain filled the fort. Griff ducked a wild swing from one of Maggie's men and drove his elbow hard into the guy's ribs. Lou tackled another, the two of them rolling across the dirt. Through it all, Jack moved like water, slipping through the chaos untouched. He wasn't fighting. He didn't need to. He had already won. Sam barely dodged a thrown chair. I hate this job. Griff was too busy trying not to get his teeth knocked out to respond. He could see Maggie out of the corner of his eye, laughing as she cracked a man over the head with the butt of her shotgun. She wasn't helping either side, just watching them tear each other apart. And then Jack made his move. By the time Griff realized what was happening, Jack was already halfway up the fort's rickety ladder, heading for the high wall. He had been waiting for this moment, for the distraction, for the confusion. Griff shoved off the man he was grappling and bolted after him. Calloway! Jack reached the top, turning just in time to see Griff climbing fast, murder in his eyes. For once, Jack actually looked impressed. Now that's the spirit, Jack said, flashing his signature grin. Griff didn't waste breath on a retort. He lunged. Jack ducked back just in time, balancing precariously on the edge of the fort wall. Below them, the fight was still raging. Lou had taken down two men but was now locked in a wrestling match with a third. Sam was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding, smart man. Griff reached for Jack's collar, but Jack twisted at the last second, sending Griff off balance. He barely caught himself, one foot slipping dangerously close to the edge. Jack sighed dramatically. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Griff gritted his teeth. I'm done losing to you. Jack's eyes flickered, just for a moment, something unreadable flashing across his face. Then he grinned again, but it was different this time. Not mocking. Not smug. Almost respectful. Well then, Jack said. I guess we'll call this a draw. And before Griff could react, Jack stepped backward and let himself fall. Griff lunged out, instinct taking over, but he was too late. Jack dropped like a stone over the edge of the fort, vanishing from sight. Griff scrambled forward, breath caught in his throat. He peered over the edge, expecting to see a broken body at the bottom. But there was nothing. No blood. No body. Just a rope, swaying gently in the breeze, tied off to a wooden beam. Griff let out a slow, frustrated breath. Son of a... A distant war cry echoed through the hills, and Griff closed his eyes, already regretting what came next. Lou staggered up next to him, holding a bruised rib. Did he just... Yeah. Sam finally appeared, looking far too unharmed compared to the rest of them. He followed their gaze over the edge. So, we lost again? Griff's expression was unreadable. He turned away, already heading back toward the mess below. No. Lou snorted. Yeah, no, we definitely lost. But Griff wasn't listening. Because for the first time since they'd started hunting Jack Calloway, he wasn't angry. He was smiling. Just a little. Because deep down, he knew the chase wasn't over. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want it to be.